Elden Ring's DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, is rumored to come out next February. It's also rumored to have a showing or release date announcement at the Game Awards in December. Considering it has been quite a long time since the game's initial release, and we're all basically huffing a mix of copium and hopium, I'm gonna assume these timeframes are reasonable. This is the longest we've ever waited for a DLC after the release of a Fromsoftware game, so I'm willing to put a bit of stock in it coming out sometime soonish. But that still leaves the question, how long or significant or big will the DLC be? Elden Ring was Fromsoftware's biggest game to date, and this seems to be the longest they've ever worked on a DLC. So it should be kind of big, but that's not saying much, so let's see if we can find out a more specific answer or guess. Looking at Fromsoftware's past games and their DLC lengths and their release dates, we can try to calculate how development time translates into DLC size. This is assuming DLC development starts around the time of the release of the base game, and obviously this is going to be shaky, but it's something to do with our time. If we get a consistent past rate of dev time to DLC length, we can use that and the dev time that has gone into Shadows of the Erdtree to calculate how long the DLC could be. Now, the best place to look is going to be at recent FromSoft games of a similar kind to Elden Ring, which probably means not Deracine. Deracine? If we also avoid Armored Core 6, as that is a bit of a different game and it obviously has no DLC out yet, we come out with Sekiro, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne. Sekiro didn't have a proper DLC, only a notable update that added a few features into the game, so I don't think it's too useful to look at here. If we look at Dark Souls 3, we have a game that got 2 paid, substantive DLCs, Ashes of Ariandel and The Ring City. If we use data from How Long to Beat, we can see that, in total, these DLCs came out to be about 13 hours of content for an average run. If you explore everything, it's going to take longer, and if you try to bum rush it, it's going to be quicker, but 13 hours as an average. The Ring City released second and came out about a year after the base game's release, so this gives us a rate of 13 hours of content for a year of development for Dark Souls 3. And if we compare that to the base game length of doing just the main content at 32 hours, we get a rate of about 40% of base game playtime per year of DLC development. I think having both of these numbers can help us build a range, since obviously Elden Ring is a bit different from Dark Souls 3 being bigger and open world. The dev hours might not translate one-to-one, so having a number and a percent can help get a spread of the full possibilities. Next up is Bloodborne, which features one of FromSoftware's most acclaimed DLCs, The Old Hunters. What started as multiple DLCs ended up being grouped into one package that released about 8 months after the base game. With The Old Hunters taking about 8 hours to beat, that gives us 1 hour per month or 12 hours per year of dev time. Compared to the average base completion time for Bloodborne, we get a rate of 36% of the base game per year of DLC development. So, Dark Souls 3 gives us 13 hours or 40% per year, and Bloodborne gives us 12 hours or 36% per year. These are very comparable rates, so that could be a sign that we're onto something. Unfortunately, the numbers get a bit skewed if we look at Dark Souls 2 or 1. But to be fair, Dark Souls 2 development journey was pretty wacky. And if we start looking at Dark Souls 1, we are going back more than a decade. In that much time, it makes sense for development in FromSoftware to change and itself develop a bit. With that in mind, I think looking at Elden Ring with our Dark Souls 3/Bloodborne rate is a good idea. It's the best one we got, at least. So Elden Ring came out in February of 2022. If the rumors are true, the DLC could come out in February of 2024. And if the rumors aren't true, it's probably going to be even longer than that. That would give us at least 2 years of development time. And we do have some reason to believe in the case of Elden Ring that DLC development was happening almost immediately after release of the base game. So let's keep going with this and see where we land. With 2 years of development and our rate of about 12 to 13 hours of content per year, we would get an estimated length of time to beat the DLC at between 24 and 26 hours. According to How Long to Beat, that is a little less than half the time to beat the main story of Elden Ring, which they list as 58 hours. In my opinion, most casual players that end up beating the game put a bit more time into it than that, so maybe closer to 70 hours than 60, and that would put this DLC closer to 1/3 than 1/2 of the base game. However, if we go by the percentage rate, we get an even bigger DLC. The rate for Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 can be averaged at about 38% of the base game length per year of development. If we do the calculation for 2 years, 76% of the Elden Ring base game would give a length of 45 to 50 hours. So our current range for the DLC would be 25 hours at the low end and 45 to 50 hours at the high end. We could kind of argue either way in terms of what is more reasonable. Elden Ring is FromSoft's biggest game, with a completionist run going above 130 hours. Plus, we know there was a lot of cut content. That means a lot of potential stuff for DLC. All of this could point to a really substantial DLC when we also consider that this is the longest they've ever worked on an expansion. But at the same time, a 50-hour DLC would be basically 5 times the length of a lot of their previous DLC packages. It would be near 10 times longer than Ashes of Ariandel. And maybe that's too ludicrous. I say maybe, but that's almost certainly too long. Besides, with the base game being a large open world, the DLC could be a chance for a more enclosed, traditional FromSoft experience, which would likely mean a shorter playtime. And even the lower end of our calculation is still really long for a DLC at 25 hours. There's too much up in the air to be certain. We still don't even know if the DLC will actually release in February. But we have a somewhat reasonable range to choose from after these calculations. If I were to let my gut hazard a guess, I would think that the large size of the base game and the long development time make a long playtime for the DLC almost certain. But long in this case is relative. A 50-hour DLC just seems too far-fetched to me, since even a 25-hour piece of content is longer than plenty of other AAA games. It's longer than 1 and maybe even 2 runs of Armored Core 6 too. So I would say the actual number might be a bit longer than our range minimum, but probably not too much. I'd put it around 30 hours as a maybe even optimistically long guess. And maybe there's a bit of hope sprinkled into that number too, but we were all shocked by how big the base game of Elden Ring was, and I am betting that the design philosophy of Elden Ring, with its length and open worldness, will still be present in the DLC to some or a decent degree. And any way you look at it, a 30-hour DLC is still a behemoth. Having that be the lower end estimate might be a reach, I think it is the more I talk about it, but with my seemingly reasonable analysis bringing us to it, I don't think it's just cope. I honestly think we have reason to expect something like that number for the final result. It's a huge game and it's a huge amount of time they've been working on the DLC. And obviously, length doesn't determine quality. I actually think Elden Ring would be a better game if it was shorter. So maybe this DLC will be an opportunity for that, an Elden Ring experience that's a bit more focused, which would probably be my dream scenario. But depending on how far From leans into that, we could get a shorter than expected playtime, which again I would be chilling with. It might be something I should be hoping for considering I wanted the base game to be shorter. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think about the DLC and my calculations. Do you think it will come out in February and be around 30 hours of content? Do you have any reason to disagree? In any case, we'll see if we get any more news or rumors before the Game Awards, and if not, we'll almost certainly get some news of some kind for Fromsoftware at that event. Until then, maybe I'll do some more Elden Ring lore or videos on other games, we'll see. Thanks for watching, peace.